Welcome back to History Podcast, everyone. I'm Gustavus.
And I'm Christina. Today, we're diving into one of the most audacious military campaigns in history. Seriously, it's pretty wild.
Absolutely. We're talking about the March Across the Belts, or, as it's known in Swedish, Toket over Bält. This was a pivotal moment, in the Dano-Swedish War of 1657 to 1658.
Yeah, it took place from late January to mid-February of 1658. We're talking January 30th to February 15th on the Julian calendar, or February 9th to 25th if you're looking at the Gregorian.
And the main players here were the Swedish Empire, led by Charles X Gustav and Carl Gustav Wrangel, up against Denmark-Norway. And the outcome? A decisive Swedish victory, which, ultimately forced Denmark to cede a significant amount of territory through the Treaty of Roskilde.
Right. So for some background, in June of 1657, Denmark kind of seized an opportunity. Sweden was pretty tied up warring with Poland and Russia at the time, so Denmark decided to declare war.
And Charles X Gustav, he wasn't just sitting around. He marched from Pomerania into Jutland with around 17,000 troops. He actually captured Frederikshavn, which gave him a good foothold.
But here's the kicker, the true game changer. The straits between the Danish islands, they froze over. And that gave Sweden an unbelievable chance to invade the Danish islands, something that would have been incredibly difficult otherwise.
Yeah, the first big part of this was the March Across the Little Belt, which happened from January 30th to February 2nd. Reconnaissance showed the ice was surprisingly solid. So Charles X, along with a significant portion of his army, we're talking anywhere from 6,000 to 12,000 troops, they walked across from Jutland to Funen.
Can you imagine walking an army across frozen water? And they weren't unopposed either. There were battles near Tybring Rig and Iversnes, but the Swedish forces, they just overwhelmed the Danish defenders. Odense and Nyborg actually surrendered on January 31st, and the Danish Navy just had to withdraw.
That's right. But the Little Belt was just a warm-up act, I guess you could say. The truly audacious part was the Great Belt Crossing, which took place from February 5th to the 11th. More surveys confirmed an ice route, this time via Långenland and Lulland all the way to Zealand.
This was even crazier. A few thousand cavalry, between 2,000 and 3,000, crossed on February 6th and 7th under Wrangel and Dahlberg. And they endured absolutely icy waters during this. I mean, it's just incredible. Nogskov and other towns surrendered pretty quickly, and the full Swedish army had crossed by February 11th.
After that, it was, a relatively swift invasion of Zealand. Swedish forces captured Vordingborg and Kog, and by February 15th, they were only about 22 kilometers from Copenhagen itself. At that point, Denmark, they really had no choice but to enter peace talks.
And those talks led to the Treaty of Roskilde, signed on February 26th. Sweden gained a huge amount of territory: Scania, Blekinge, Holland, Bohuslän, Bornholm, and Trondelag. Denmark also had to pay reparations, promise no anti-Swedish alliances, and even offered military aid. Though Bornholm and Trondelag were actually returned to Denmark in 1660.
So, looking back, the success of this campaign really came down to a few things: a bold strategy, skilled leadership, and, of course, those incredibly unique ice conditions.
Absolutely. And historians, they still debate it. Was it a stroke of genius from Charles X, or was it just incredibly lucky risk-taking? Either way, it completely shifted regional power dynamics and, shaped Sweden's modern borders.
And its legacy, it lives on. The campaign became legendary in Sweden. It inspired poems, statues, and, as Christina mentioned, continues to fuel historical debate, especially over who really deserves the most credit, Charles X or Erik Dahlberg.
It really was, an extraordinary winter military operation. The fact that Swedish forces crossed frozen bodies of water to achieve such a decisive victory, it's just mind-boggling.
Indeed.
And that brings us to the end of another fascinating episode of History Podcast. Thank you for joining us today, Christina.
My pleasure, Gustavus, and thank you all for listening. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into the past.